Marina checked her phone for the time. It was 9:47 in the morning and the auction was about to begin. The industrial lot stretched out in front of her, filled with broken machinery, old vehicles, and piles of metal ready to be crushed and recycled. The sun was high, but the air was cold. Autumn in Portland could be harsh, and today felt like the weather was trying to tell her something. She had come here with all her money, not in cash, but in a bank check sitting in her bag. $240,000, her entire inheritance from her grandmother. The money that was supposed to give her security, supposed to let her breathe easier in a world that never seemed to slow down. Instead, she was about to spend it on something that most people would call garbage. Marina worked as an inventory specialist for a shipping company. It was not a glamorous job, but it paid well enough and gave her access to information about cargo that moved through Portland every single day. 3 weeks ago, while doing her routine work, she had found something strange. A shipping container marked for destruction sat in the salvage yard. It was rusted, covered in damage, and stamped with symbols that made no sense. The symbols had caught her eye immediately. They were not random scratches or simple graffiti. They were precise, mathematical, arranged in patterns that seemed to follow some kind of logic. Marina had studied them carefully, photographed them, and researched them online. She found nothing. No historical record, no language database matched them. No one she asked could explain what they meant. Everyone told her the same thing. The symbols were just random markings, possibly made by workers from another country, possibly just vandalism. The container was old. It had been in storage for almost 200 years, ever since the early days of steamships and international cargo transport. The company that owned it had decided it was too damaged to repair, so it was marked for crushing. But Marina knew better. Something about those symbols told her they meant something important. She had used every spare moment to research them. She visited libraries. She talked to linguistics professors. She even tried contacting museums. Everyone was polite but dismissive. No one took her seriously. She was just a young woman with an obsession with old metal, they seemed to think. Then she heard about the auction. The salvage lot was selling off items that could not be processed efficiently. The shipping container was one of them. It would be sold to whoever could bid the highest. After the auction, it would be crushed into scrap metal within a week. Marina had made her decision immediately. She would buy it herself. Her brother had laughed when she told him. He was sitting in her apartment, drinking coffee when she explained her plan. He had choked on his drink and laughed so hard his face turned red. "You are going to do what?" he asked once he could speak again. "I am going to buy the container," Marina said calmly. "Marina, do you understand what you are saying? That container is worth maybe $1,000. As metal, as scrap. You want to spend your entire inheritance on something you will have to pay to have destroyed anyway." Marina had not answered him. She knew how crazy it sounded. But she also knew what her instincts told her. Those symbols meant something. They were not random. And if she did not buy the container and preserve it, the world would lose whatever information or technology or mystery it contained. Now, standing at the auction, she watched the auctioneer setting up his stand. The man was overweight and looked bored. He probably had sold thousands of containers and scraps of metal in his life. One more would mean nothing to him. The auction began at exactly 10 in the morning. The auctioneer worked quickly through the items. A pile of copper pipes sold for $800. An old printing machine went for $1,200. A collection of office furniture was purchased by a used furniture store for $3,000. Then the auctioneer came to the shipping container. "Item 42, he announced, reading from his list. One standard shipping container, heavily rusted, unable to be repaired due to structural damage. Fair warning, this unit will need to go straight to processing. No sale as is for use. What do we start at? $1,000. Do I hear 1,000? A man in a work vest raised his hand. 1,000, I have 1,000. Do I hear 1,500? Marina raised her hand. The room went silent for a moment. Then someone snorted. It was a small sound, but it was clearly laughter. Marina could feel eyes on her. She kept her hand up. 1,500 I have. Do I hear 2,000? The man in the work vest seemed confused. He had clearly only wanted to flip the scrap metal for a small profit. He lowered his hand and stepped back. 2,000? I have 2,000 from the young lady. Do I hear 2,500? No one moved. Going once, going twice. Sold to the lady in the blue coat for $2,000. The gavel came down. Marina felt her stomach drop. It was done. She owned the container now. She had just committed to spending a significant portion of her money on a piece of rusted metal. The room seemed to buzz with low comments. She could hear people talking about her. The words crazy, stupid, and waste of money reached her ears clearly. The auctioneer was moving on to the next item, already forgetting about her purchase. Marina walked to the auction clerk's table and provided her information. She paid the money. The man seemed sorry for her, which was almost worse than the laughter. That afternoon, she hired a salvage crew to transport the container to a storage unit she had rented on the outskirts of town. She had already secured the space last week, knowing that if she won the auction, she would need somewhere to keep her purchase safe and private. The heavy machinery groaned and moved the container carefully into the storage unit. Marina watched every movement, making sure nothing damaged it further. The workers thought she was strange, but they did their job well. Once they left, Marina was alone with the container. She walked around it slowly, running her fingers across the rust and the symbols. Even after sitting in the dirty industrial lot all morning, the symbols seemed to glow faintly in the afternoon light. Or maybe that was just her imagination. She pulled her camera from her bag and took more photographs. The symbols covered the entire exterior of the container. Some were large and bold. Others were small and delicate. They seemed to tell a story, though Marina could not read that story yet. She had rented the storage unit for 3 months. That should give her enough time to figure out what she had found. And if she could not solve the mystery, at least she would have bought it enough time before it was crushed into nothing. That evening, Marina brought a sleeping bag to the storage unit. She set it up on the concrete floor, right next to the shipping container. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, she lay inside the bag, staring up at the metal walls above her. By the 5th day, Marina had barely slept. She spent her time documenting every single symbol on the container's exterior. She had created a detailed map of where each symbol appeared. She had measured their exact size and spacing. She had even made rubbings of them on paper to study them more carefully. The work was slow and exhausting. Her hands were sore from the rough rust. Her back hurt from bending and stretching to reach the higher symbols. But she could not stop. Something inside her demanded that she understand what she had found. On the 6th day, something changed. Marina was working on the lower section of the container when she felt it. A vibration. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it was definitely there. She pressed her palm flat against the metal and felt it clearly. The container was vibrating. She pulled out her phone and checked for any nearby machinery that might be causing the vibration. The storage unit was empty except for her and the container. There was no electrical equipment nearby. No traffic passing close enough to create such vibrations. No construction work happening in the surrounding area. The vibration continued for 3 minutes, then stopped. Marina stood very still, waiting to see if it would happen again. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of her own breathing and the faint sounds of the city far away beyond the storage unit walls. That night she did not sleep at all. She sat in front of the container, watching it. Was it broken somehow? Was something inside it about to explode? She considered calling someone, but who would believe her? The salvage company would send someone to examine it and probably condemn the container immediately. On the 7th day, the vibration happened again. This time it was stronger. Marina could see the rust on the container's surface shake. Dust particles fell from the metal. The vibration lasted for almost 10 minutes, growing stronger with each passing second. Then it stopped abruptly, as if someone had simply turned off a switch. Marina made a decision. She needed to open the container. She spent the rest of the day gathering tools. A pry bar, a hammer, a drill with metal bits, safety glasses, work gloves, everything she would need to force the container open without destroying the symbols she needed to preserve. On the 8th day, she began. She started with the seams where the container's walls met. The rust fell away surprisingly easily, almost like it was not really rust at all, just a covering that wanted to be removed. As she worked, she noticed something very strange. Beneath the rust and corrosion, the metal underneath was perfectly smooth and shiny. No damage, no imperfections, just clean, perfect metal. It took her 6 hours of careful work, but finally, the door of the container began to swing open. Marina held her breath as the gap widened. She could not see inside at first because the interior was completely dark. She grabbed her flashlight and aimed it into the opening. What she saw made her knees weak. The interior of the container was nothing like the exterior. It was clean, perfectly clean. The walls gleamed in the flashlight beam with a silvery white color that seemed impossible for metal that had spent 200 years sitting in salvage yards. There was no dust, no damage, no signs of age or decay. In the center of the container sat a device. Marina stepped inside carefully, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The device was roughly the size of a large desktop computer, but it looked nothing like any technology she had ever seen. Part of it was crystal-like, transparent and glowing with a soft blue light. Part of it was metallic, smooth and polished. The symbols from the outside of the container covered every surface of the device. She reached out slowly and touched it. The moment her fingers made contact with the crystal surface, everything changed. Information flooded her mind. Not words exactly, but concepts, images, understanding, as if someone had opened a door in her brain and poured in knowledge like water through a broken dam. She understood that the device was a communication relay. Ancient by human standards, though it had only been made about 800 years ago according to its creator's timeline. It had been hidden deliberately inside this shipping container and placed aboard a human cargo ship 2 centuries ago. The creators had been a species called They were travelers, explorers, scientists who moved through the galaxy studying other species and sharing knowledge. But they had made an enemy, a powerful civilization called the Collective. The Collective did not believe in other species having independence. They viewed any emerging civilization as either a future threat or a future resource to be controlled. They hunted species that they deemed dangerous. They erased entire worlds. They had created this relay as an insurance policy. They had placed it on human cargo ships because they believed in humanity's potential. They believed that humans, though primitive, had something special, something that made them different from other species, something that made them valuable. The relay had been programmed to wait for someone with human DNA to activate it. Pure human DNA, not modified, not enhanced by future technology, just human. When the right person touched it, it would send out a signal. And Marina understood one more thing, the thing that made her hands shake with fear and excitement. The Collective was coming. They had detected humanity's early space probes and satellites. They had marked Earth for investigation. Within 200 years, perhaps less, they would arrive to assess whether humanity was a threat. The relay could send a message across the galaxy, a message to the species that had been watching humans from the shadows, species that wanted to help, species that wanted to know if humans were ready to join a larger community of worlds. The question was whether Marina would activate it. She pulled her hand away from the device and stumbled backward. Her mind felt like it had been stretched beyond its limits. She could barely think clearly. The information kept swirling in her thoughts, refusing to settle into any kind of organized understanding. Marina left the container and walked out into the cool evening air. She sat on the concrete. Marina spent 2 full days studying the information the device provided. She did not sleep more than a few minutes at a time. She would rest for an hour, then go back to the container and touch the relay again, pulling more information from its vast database. The device could show her things, not through a screen or a display like a computer, but by sending images directly into her mind. She saw star charts of the galaxy. She saw records of hundreds of different species. She saw the history of the Collective and the civilizations they had destroyed. The images were horrifying. One species, had been peaceful farmers who lived on a single planet. They had achieved advanced technology but had no weapons, no military, no defenses. The Collective assessed them as a potential threat based on their technological advancement. Within 50 years, they were extinct. Their planet was strip-mined for resources and left a dead, empty world. Another species, had hidden from the Collective for 3 generations. They built underground cities and developed camouflage technology. It did not matter. When the Collective found them, they were hunted down methodically until none remained. Species after species, world after world. Civilizations ended not because they were dangerous, but because the Collective believed they might become dangerous. The assessment process was cold and mathematical, long-term threat probability, resource value, strategic importance. A computer made the final decision about whether a species would live or die. Humanity was on a list. Marina saw it clearly. Earth was marked for assessment. The timeline was uncertain, but all signs pointed to the collective arriving within 150 to 200 years. By that time, human technology would likely be advanced enough to be classified as a genuine threat. The relay offered a way to change that timeline. If Marina sent the signal, it would broadcast humanity's location, history, and current development level to listening stations across the galaxy. Species that had been watching would know that humans were ready for contact. More importantly, they would know that humans were intelligent enough to seek help before it was too late. But there were risks. Sending the signal would announce Earth's location to everyone listening, not just the friendly species, not just the neutral traders, but also the collective if they were within range. It could accelerate their arrival. It could turn Earth into a target before humanity was ready to defend itself. On the third morning, Marina made her phone call. Park was a professor at Portland State University. Marina had taken one of his classes 2 years ago as an elective. He was an unusual teacher who spent more time talking about the theoretical possibility of extraterrestrial languages than about the actual languages humans spoke. During her class, Marina had written a paper about how mathematical symbols could be universal across species. It was a theoretical exercise, nothing serious, but had given her an A and written a note on her paper saying that her thinking was advanced and original. More importantly, when Marina had asked him for research advice about the mysterious symbols, he had not laughed. He had simply asked her to send him photographs. When she did, his response had been calm and thoughtful. Now Marina called him and asked if they could meet. He agreed immediately, as if he had been waiting for a contact. They met at a small coffee shop downtown. It was a thin man in his 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. He ordered tea and sat across from Marina at a small table in the back corner. "Tell me," he said simply. Marina told him everything. She told him about the shipping container and the symbols. She told him about the device and what it could do. She told him about the collective and the species they had destroyed. Listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat quietly for a long moment, stirring his tea. "I have been waiting for someone to find one of these for 30 years, he said finally. "There are others, 6 that I know of, hidden around the world, that were very thorough. They knew that if humanity was going to survive, we would need to know the truth before it was too late." "You knew about this?" Marina asked, shocked. "I have researched evidence of their existence. I have studied the mathematics embedded in your symbols. I have published papers that no one took seriously because I could not show them the actual artifacts. But yes, I knew. Or at least, I suspected strongly enough to spend my life studying it." Marina felt confused and relieved at the same time. "What do I do?" Leaned forward and met her eyes directly. "You have to make a choice, Marina. The choice is not just about the relay. The choice is about whether you believe humanity deserves a future. If you send the signal, you will change everything. You will transform humanity from an isolated species into a recognized part of a larger galactic community. You will also make us vulnerable. You will announce our location and our existence to powers we do not yet understand. But if I do not send the signal, then the collective will still come, but we will not be ready. They will make their assessment without us having any voice in the matter. They will decide if we live or die based on what they observe." Marina thought about her brother's children. She thought about the billions of people on Earth who had no idea that their existence hung in the balance. She thought about whoever they were, leaving behind this message because they believed in humanity enough to give them a choice. "I need to send it," she said quietly. Nodded. "I thought you would say that. Then we need to move quickly. Once you send the signal, we will have perhaps 48 hours before governments around the world become aware of what happened. You will need to be prepared for that. You will need to be strong." That evening, Marina returned to the storage unit alone. She stood before the device and placed her hands on its crystal surface. She could feel the energy beneath her fingers. She could feel it humming, waiting, ready. She sent the signal. The device flared with brilliant white light. The humming grew louder, more intense. Marina felt the energy flowing through her body, flowing out into the sky, spreading in all directions at speeds faster than light itself. It carried information about Earth, about humanity, about what humans had achieved and what they were capable of becoming. For the first time in recorded history, the universe officially knew that humans existed. Marina pulled her hands away and stepped back. The device returned to its normal soft blue glow. The first 24 hours after Marina sent the signal were quiet. Too quiet. She waited at the storage unit expecting something dramatic to happen. Alarms, sirens, explosions, but nothing came. The storage unit remained peaceful and empty. Only the device glowed in the darkness. Then, on the second day, everything changed. Marina had gone home to sleep for the first time in days when her phone started ringing. His voice was shaking with urgency. "Have you checked the news?" he asked. Marina turned on her television. Every channel was reporting the same thing. Scientists around the world had detected an unusual radiation burst coming from Portland. The source was unknown. The government had issued an emergency alert. Military personnel were being dispatched to investigate. Marina knew they were coming for her. She grabbed a bag with essentials and drove back to the storage unit. She needed to be there when they arrived. She needed to be in control of the narrative. The federal agents arrived within an hour. Black vehicles with tinted windows pulled into the parking lot. Men in suits and body armor walked toward the storage unit with weapons visible on their hips. Marina stood outside the unit, waiting for them. "Marina Tran?" one of the agents asked. "Yes," she said calmly. "You need to come with us. We have questions about this location and the radiation event." Marina did not resist. She knew that any aggressive behavior would only make things worse. She walked to one of the black vehicles and got inside. As they drove away, she could see more agents arriving, setting up barriers around the storage unit. For the next 12 hours, Marina answered questions in a small concrete room with no windows. Different agents came in and out. They asked her about the container, about how she obtained it, about what was inside. She told them everything, about the relay, about the message she had sent. Most of them did not believe her. She could see it in their eyes. They thought she was crazy. They thought the device was some kind of elaborate hoax. But they also could not explain what the radiation burst was or how it had originated from exactly where Marina said it had. By the end of the day, her status had changed. She was no longer a suspect. She was a witness to something that the government did not yet understand. International observers began to arrive in Portland. Scientists from different countries were brought into the facility where Marina was being held. They examined the relay. They took measurements. They tried to understand the technology. None of them could. Was brought to the facility as well. He was recognized as an expert on and was immediately given access to study the device more closely. When he and Marina saw each other, they exchanged a look that meant everything was about to become much more complicated. On the third day after the signal was sent, something new happened. A message came back. It came not through radio or electronic transmission, but through the relay itself. The device activated automatically and projected images into the minds of everyone who was in the storage unit. There were 11 people present. 11 people experienced the same alien contact at the same moment. The message showed them a fleet of ships, not human ships, alien ships of designs that could not possibly have been built by human engineering. The ships belonged to species that called themselves the Allied Coalition. They had been waiting for humanity to reach out. They had been watching Earth for 300 years, observing human development, assessing human potential. The message was clear and direct. They were coming to Earth, not to conquer, not to take resources, but to make contact and to offer humanity a choice. Join the coalition as an emerging member, share knowledge and technology, protect each other against threats like the collective. Or remain isolated, refuse contact, face whatever challenges came alone. The message ended, and everyone in the room stood in stunned silence. Captain James was the commanding officer of the Joint Space Command. He had been brought in to oversee the military aspects of the situation. He was a career soldier who had spent his entire life preparing for conventional threats. Aliens from outer space had never been in his training. He found Marina after the message had ended. "This is real," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Marina replied. "And you sent a signal that announced our location to an entire galaxy of creatures we did not know existed." "I did." Ran his hand through his hair and looked away. "If they are hostile, humanity could be destroyed before we even understand what is happening." "The message said they were waiting for us to reach out," Marina said. "The message could be a lie," said. "The most effective way to conquer a species would be to convince them you are friendly first." Marina had not thought of that, but she knew it was true. She had gambled with the entire future of humanity, and she might have made a terrible mistake. Over the next few days, international governments worked frantically to establish a response plan. The United Nations called an emergency session. World leaders debated what to do about the approaching alien fleet. Some wanted to build weapons, some wanted to hide, some wanted to send another message welcoming the coalition. The debates went on for weeks. Meanwhile, Marina stayed in the research facility with the relay. She spent hours examining it, learning from it, pulling more information about the Allied coalition and the other species that made up their organization. She learned that the coalition included 53 different species. Some were biological, like humans. Some were partially mechanical. Some were beings of energy and light. They had formed the coalition because they believed that species working together could resist the collective better than species working alone. She also learned something else, something that changed how she understood what she had done. They were not extinct. They were members of the coalition. They had survived by adapting and hiding, and they had left the relay on Earth with the intention of making humanity part of their greater family. On the day that the Allied coalition ships arrived in Earth's orbit, Marina stood with Captain and watched the displays showing the massive vessels positioning themselves around the planet. There was no sign of weapons, no aggressive movements, just presence. Looked at Marina with a mixture of fear and respect. I came here today thinking that the worst thing that could happen to humanity was that we would be destroyed by aliens, he said. But now I realize the worst thing would have been to never know they existed at all. You gave us a choice. You gave us the chance to decide our own future. I hope I made the right choice, Marina said. So do I, replied. Now we find out. The storage unit was quiet and still. Nothing visible had changed. 6 months had passed since the Allied coalition arrived in Earth's orbit. In those 180 days, humanity had been transformed. The world was not the same anymore. It could never be the same. The first month had been the most chaotic. The world governments argued about how to respond to the coalition's presence. Some nations wanted to attack the ships. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Some wanted to hide and pretend the ships were not there. But gradually a consensus formed. Humanity would engage in peaceful negotiations. World leaders were selected to represent Earth. They boarded one of the coalition ships and met with the alien representatives. The meetings lasted for days. Hours of discussion about human rights, human technology, human potential. In the end, the decision was made. Humanity would join the Allied coalition as an emerging member species. They would receive access to limited technology and education. They would agree not to expand their military beyond certain boundaries. They would open their borders to scientists and educators from other coalition members who wanted to study human culture. In exchange, humanity would receive protection from the collective. The coalition would defend Earth if the collective came. They would help humanity prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. The second month brought the arrival of coalition scientists and technicians. They came to Earth in small groups, establishing research centers in major cities. They taught human scientists about new technologies. They helped establish the Interstellar Defense Commission, a military organization dedicated to preparing humanity for space travel and potential conflict. Marina was at the center of all of this. She had become humanity's official liaison to the coalition. Her unique ability to interface with the relay made her invaluable. She spent hours each day in communication with the alien representatives, helping them understand human culture and helping humans understand the broader galaxy. She also learned things that terrified her. The collective was larger and more powerful than anyone had realized. They controlled 40% of the known galaxy. They had the military power to destroy human civilization without much effort. But they also had rules, laws that governed how they could interact with emerging species. They could not simply attack and destroy a species that was part of the coalition, not without cause, not without facing consequences from the other member species. The third month brought the arrival of the assessment team from the collective. 3 ships entered Earth's orbit on a clear morning in March. They did not broadcast any hostile intentions, but their presence made everyone nervous. Captain had ships ready for combat, though everyone knew that human weapons would be useless against collective technology. The collective team came down to the surface in small shuttles. They were creatures that looked nothing like humans. tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. They moved in synchronized patterns that made Marina think of machines more than living beings. They set up monitoring stations across the planet. They scanned every inch of Earth. They examined human records, human culture, human technology. The process took 3 days. During that time, Marina did not sleep. She sat in the command center with Captain and other military personnel, waiting for the assessment to be complete, waiting to learn whether her species would live or die. On the 4th day, the assessment was complete. The collective transmitted their findings to the coalition, and copies were given to human leaders. The document was long and detailed and written in the cold, mathematical language of the collective, but the conclusion was clear. Humanity was classified as a level 7 emerging threat. The estimated threat maturity was 50 to 70 years. The collective did not recommend termination. Instead, they recommended containment and monitoring. Human expansion beyond their solar system would be limited. Advanced technologies would be restricted. Military development would be monitored. In other words, humanity would live, but they would live under restrictions. They would be confined to their home system until they were deemed ready to expand further. They would be watched constantly. They would be controlled. Captain read the assessment silently, then looked at Marina. "Is this a victory?" he asked. "It is survival," Marina replied. "Victory comes later when we prove them wrong." The collective ships departed the same day the assessment was completed. They left behind monitoring stations and promised to return in 10 years for a secondary assessment. The 3 ships rose into space and disappeared in a burst of light. The months that followed were a blur of activity. Humanity organized itself. New governments were formed with the specific purpose of managing contact with the coalition. Educational programs were established to teach people about space, about alien species, about the broader galactic community. Marina worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. She was the bridge between humanity and the stars. She attended meetings with world leaders. She studied the relay constantly, learning everything it could teach her about the galaxy. She answered questions from scientists who wanted to understand how the technology worked. By the 6th month, Marina was exhausted. She had lost weight. Her eyes were always tired, but she kept working. One evening, Park found her in the research facility where the relay was kept. She was sitting on the floor next to the device, just touching its surface gently, letting it feed her information in small doses. "You should rest," said. He sat down beside her. "I cannot rest," Marina replied. "There is too much to do, too much to learn." "The work will be here tomorrow," said. "Humanity will not fall apart if you take one night off." Marina removed her hand from the relay and turned to look at her old professor. "Do you know what I have been thinking about?" she asked. "What?" "That day at the auction, when everyone laughed at me, when they thought I was crazy for spending my inheritance on a piece of rusted metal." Smiled. "You were right and they were wrong. That is how it usually works out." "But I could have been wrong," Marina said. "If that relay had been a hoax, if those symbols had meant nothing, if I had been crazy, I would have thrown away my future for nothing." "Yes," agreed, "but you were not crazy, your instincts were right." "My instincts risked the entire world," Marina said. "I took a gamble on behalf of 7 billion people who had no say in my decision. I activated a signal that announced humanity to creatures we did not understand. I could have destroyed us all." Was quiet for a long moment. "Do you regret it?" he asked finally. Marina thought about the question. She thought about the collective and the species they had destroyed. She thought about their long vigil watching humanity, waiting for the right moment. She thought about the future that lay ahead for humans on Earth and in the wider galaxy. "No," she said, "I do not regret it, but I understand now that some choices are so big, so important, that there is no way to be sure they are right. You just have to trust yourself and believe that you made the best decision you could with the information you had." Put his hand on her shoulder. "That is all any of us can do, Marina. That is all anyone has ever been able to do." They sat together in silence, watching the relay glow softly in the darkness. Outside the facility, the world had changed. Humanity had changed. The future was uncertain and full of danger, but it was a future that humans would face together as a recognized member of a galactic community. Marina placed her hand back on the relay. More information flowed into her mind. The stories of 1,000 different species, the history of the coalition, the long, slow building of a civilization that spanned the stars. Her rusty shipping container had changed everything. She had bought a mystery at an auction, and in doing so, she had given humanity something far more valuable than money could ever buy. She had given them hope, and she had given them a choice. But everything was different. Outside the storage unit and tried to breathe normally. Her entire worldview had shifted in the span of a few seconds. Everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe had changed. She thought about her job, her simple life, her boring, normal existence. Then she thought about the symbols, about a species that had believed in humanity enough to leave them a tool to save themselves. Marina knew she would not sleep tonight either, but tomorrow she would need to talk to someone. She would need help understanding what to do next, and she knew exactly who to call. The container loomed over her like a guardian, or perhaps like a prisoner waiting for release. Marina did not know which one it was, but she was determined to find out.